Hi everyone, I'm going to be speaking to you today about the second half of January and the new moon that we have coming up in Capricorn on the 18th. Now, it's fair to say that this second half of the month, second half of January, has quite a different energy to the first half. Much more dynamic, much more forward moving, and we are really in some exciting times, I think. Remember that we are in the year of the fire horse. The last time we had a year of the fire horse in Chinese astrology was in 1966. And many of you will know that 1966, really it was 65 to 67, was a very, very powerful time for, it was a very rich time culturally for art, music, poetry, but also it was quite a revolutionary time. There were a lot of protests and demonstrations about human rights, civil rights, big protests about gay rights, women's lib, the Black Power movement. It was all about greater equality. And Pluto in Aquarius, always, all through historical cycles, has been about greater equality, having recognized the great inequality that is prevailing in society, whether that's historically or now. And so in addition to that, remember that the exact conjunction between Uranus and Pluto, the seed point for Uranus and Pluto's cycle was 1965 and 1966. That is now coming to blossom with the trine being absolutely exact. In fact, it happens 9 times exactly, but particularly in July 2026, we're going to get a real peak of exactitude of that unique configuration I've talked about so many times that involves that trine between Uranus and Pluto. So both the year of the fire horse being in 1966 and the fact that was the time of the seed point of Uranus-Pluto, both are really saying the same thing. Demands for greater equality, more revolutionary energy, etc. And we're moving towards a very dynamic, rest of the year really, February and rest of the year. So we move into February, we've got a very important solar eclipse on the 17th, just 3 days before we have that Saturn Neptune, that one-time Saturn Neptune conjunction. So at 0 of Aries. So really, if you haven't already, start to imagine, dream in, plan a new vision for whatever you want in your life. Is that new vision a different relationship, a different home? You might be throwing yourself into a completely different interest or passion. You might just want to meditate more, have a change of state, which is more deeply rooted in the spiritual, whatever it is. And remember that you would have had some kind of rehearsal July, August, September last year. So, and really June, July, August, I'd say most exactly last year, you might have got a taster for what is really going to start to emerge from late February onwards this year. April will be another key point in that unfolding for you, and July will be a significant peak point. But start to dream, imagine, plan now, because it's going to come down the track so fast. This year is going to be even faster than last year. Pluto, for quite a few months this year, is going to be hovering around 3 degrees of Aquarius, particularly the first few months of the year and also coming back later in the year. 3 degrees is the ascendant of China. I mentioned this in the preview for 2026. I think China could become bigger on the world stage in some way. One of the reasons we're seeing a huge increase in the price for silver is that China produces a lot of silver, and they are right now tightening their export controls on silver, which means less silver will be available from China, which tightens the supply, hence the increase in price. And silver, as you may know, has a lot of industrial uses, as well as simply being an investment. What I think is very interesting as well, I've mentioned in the past that The Saturn-Neptune conjunction is very linked to Russian history. We had a Saturn-Neptune conjunction in 1917, the Russian Revolution, 1952 to 53. We had the birth of Putin, death of Stalin, 1989. November 1989 was the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the beginning of the end of the Soviet Union. So it's always a redefinition of Russia. So let us see what happens this time around. There are discussions around some kind of peace deal in the current war. Is that going to happen? How is that going to redefine Russia this time around? And remember also, President Putin has a Saturn-Neptune conjunction natally, as does Xi Jinping, President of China. If you have a Saturn-Neptune conjunction, if you're born 1952 or 53 or 1989, you will have a Saturn-Neptune conjunction in your birth chart, which means that this Saturn-Neptune conjunction coming exact next month, although it's really been within orb really all last year and will continue to be until about April, but that Saturn then starts to move on quickly. You may be pulled into some kind of more influential position because it resonates with your birth chart, or if you have any planets or angles round about 0 to 2 degrees of the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. But it's a very big deal. This is a very important, very big new beginning for humanity in general. Also, that Neptune is at the final degree of Pisces until the 26th of January, and that's the very last degree of the zodiac. So, and you will never have another time in your life when Neptune is in Pisces because it has an orbit of 165 degrees. And once it goes into Aries on the 26th of January, no going back. Doesn't go back to Pisces again. Certainly in your lifetime with that 165 degree orbit. So there is a sense of the dissolution, the collapse of the old order. Neptune is the ruler of Pisces. They're both very connected to the seas, the oceans, water issues in general. There's just this sense of disintegration. It's very linked also to floods and tsunamis. We've seen some horrendous flooding in particularly the northwest of America. I think it was Washington State, Oregon and Montana. I think that was hit most severely, but also California. Floods, tsunamis, excessive water. It's also, so, stay calm, stay in peace. Use the nightly free 15-minute meditations to just calm everything down. Imagine a soft blue light calming everything down. The more we as humanity are calm, the more we calm down these extreme weather events. But I do think to some extent they will continue through 2026. Neptune is also linked in this very prominent position to the media, to drugs of all kinds, to the illusion or disillusionment or the dissolving of the veil in this very last degree. Any deception that has been very viral and widespread, Neptune is to do with the viral. Even when Neptune moves onto 0 of Aries, the Neptune archetype of all I've just discussed is on the public stage. So even though it's moved into Aries, which could make fires more prominent, nevertheless, all of those things I've discussed about water, floods, tsunamis, etc., may still be prominent because 0 degrees of the cardinals puts it onto the world stage in a bigger way. Hope I'm making sense there. Also at 29 degrees of Pisces, there's a fixed star called Sheet, S-H-E-A-T, which is to do with kind of misfortunes at sea in particular. So let's just try and calm everything down as far as we are able. So Neptune conjunct Saturn, as I will have mentioned before, is about the dissolution of the traditional authority structures. Dissolution, Neptune, authority structures, Saturn. And any deception, Neptune, or scandals, Neptune, involving traditional authority structures will become much clearer as we move through this tipping over the 29 degrees of Pisces into 0 of Aries. These are really, really big months. Today, as I'm filming, President Maduro of Venezuela has just been taken from power. But the reason I mention these things is because they are so clearly a reflection of the astrology that I've been talking about for so many months, along with many other astrologers as well. So President Maduro of Venezuela has been taken from power. Of course, that is echoing what I've been saying, not only about Neptune-Saturn conjunction, but also the fact that transiting Uranus is at 27 of Taurus. That is conjunct a fixed star called Algol, which is about leaders losing their heads. So people falling from high position. More to come, I'd suggest. If we look at the chart for Venezuela, which is set for 22nd of September 1830, noon Caracas, we can see that transiting Neptune is exactly opposing the Sun, the leader. In that chart, the Sun always represents the leader at 29 degrees of Virgo. It is also, transiting Neptune is also opposing the Midheaven in that Venezuelan chart, which I think is right on 0 of Libra. And also transiting Neptune is square to the moon, which is at 0 degrees of Sagittarius, in the 11th house of politics as well. So we have some very, very big, clear astrology for the country of Venezuela right at this time. So interesting that this is happening now. I just also want to point out that the French president, who was born on the 21st of December 1977 at 10:40 in the morning in Amiens, Amiens, his Sun and Mercury are both at 29 degrees of Sagittarius. His Sun rules the 7th house of the marriage partner or the long-term romantic partner. It can also be a long-term business partner. The 8th house rules secrets and scandals. So Neptune, obviously, transiting Neptune is square to his Sun and Mercury. And remember, Neptune is only going to be in that 29 degrees of Pisces position until the 26th of January. There's always a sense of dissolution, weakness, undertow. Remember, Neptune rules the seas and the tides. We will see what happens. But also, the French president has transiting Uranus right now, very tightly square his midheaven at 29 degrees of Sagittarius. Currently, transiting Uranus is at 27, and it will gradually move on to 29 degrees of Taurus, squaring that midheaven, which is about a radical sudden change in career or status in March and April until the 26th of April. Then it moves into Gemini. So some interesting things to watch. And if we look down the timeline to the 17th of February, when we have that very important solar eclipse at 28 of Sagittarius, by astrocartography, that's falling across the midheaven in Paris. So just we will see and observe what unfolds. But these are just interesting points to note. I initially wanted to go into investigative journalism, so I think a little bit of that is kind of coming through. Remember also that at the moment, the conjunction between Venus and Mars is not visible. Neither of those planets are visible all of January. So there could be a lot happening behind the scenes, which doesn't become clear until those two planets start to become visible again, and Venus starts to become visible in February. So whatever is happening behind the scenes that we have no idea about, things are going to start to unfold in February and onwards. And that kind of echoes the fact that Uranus moves stationary direct on the 4th of February, and we're going to feel that certainly that whole first week of February. So we're moving towards this very rapidly. Uranus has essentially been in Taurus since 2018. See where Taurus falls in your chart, which house area it falls in. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download a free birth chart from my website. You can go to the link below and buy a 2-part video series from my store. And you can watch that to infinity, as many times as you like, as long as you like, because it takes you from zero to understanding where these points that I mention in updates fall in your chart and what that means for you in those areas of life for you. It's not a personalized birth chart reading. These are teaching videos, but you'll find them very, very helpful in following these updates with a greater sense of meaning for your own life. Certainly Uranus in Taurus has been about the emergence of cryptocurrencies, digital currencies for sure, but what has it meant for you? There's often a greater use of technology if it falls in your 6th house or your 10th house of work and career. There could have been, say it's been falling in your 11th house, you could have developed new friendship networks which are much more alternative and radical. In the 4th house, you may have moved home or get very restless around your home. But the videos will take you through all these potential meanings. So, important to say that this second half of January, which does have a very different energy and dynamism to the first half, is a very important setup for July. Well, really for April, a big peak, and also for July, we get a kind of crescendo, but really for the rest of the year. So if we can live with an increasing sense of consciousness around our thoughts and our feelings, this will help us immensely in what we want to achieve personally. So let us now look at that chart for the new moon in Capricorn. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. This happens at 19:53 UK time, so just adjust for your own time zone. It's happening at 28 degrees, 44 minutes of Capricorn. And this is a huge lineup, actually. Ignore the clock face, ignore the houses, unless you live in the UK. This is a really big lineup in Capricorn and Aquarius, and really this hemisphere of the chart. That's going to become, I think, even more extreme as we move into February and then again in April. We're going to have a lot of Aquarian energy in February, extraordinary map because Pluto's there too. Then in April, we have just beyond words, the most incredible lineup in Aries. That is a big, big time of new beginnings. So this is at 28 degrees, 44 minutes of Capricorn. Sun and moon always conjunct at a new moon. So see where that falls in your chart and what new seed you want to plant for what you want to blossom in your life moving forwards. So we still have Venus and Mars not visible from the Earth, as I say, but still pretty much in conjunction and equidistant from the Sun. So this is representative of the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine, as I've mentioned before. So whatever is being born at this new seed point is being born with love. But it's really a more universal love, a more humanitarian love, because it's in Aquarius, than a personal love. This is all a massive, we've got 6 planets here in conjunction, essentially. You can pretty much stretch to Mars and Pluto, 7 degrees, but you can pretty much do that to say this is one huge conjunction. So taking it piece by piece, this is the new beginning. And Capricorn is very much to do with structures. In a way, Capricorn is to do with the past and Aquarius is to do with the future. So we have a very clear straddling here of the past and the future. So Capricorn tends to be the old traditional structures, the hierarchical structures, the verticality, the top-down structures. But it also includes really the kind of structures we want to birth, not only because this is happening at a new moon, but because so many of these planets are actually trine to Uranus, which I'll come on to in a moment. But Capricorn is always also to do with planning, strategic planning, long-term planning, pragmatic, realistic planning of what we want to build for the long term that is realistic. It's like a reality check as well. Get real about our future, not just pie in the sky, not just Neptunian. So, as I say, this is all trining. You can include Mars, Mercury, Sun, Moon, and even Venus in there. So this could be, Capricorn is also linked to big business and banking. Remember that when Pluto entered Capricorn in 2008, within a short time we had the banking crisis, September 2008. So Capricorn has very clear links to banking, that kind of thing. Venus is linked to banking and currencies and wealth. And they are all trine to Uranus. Now, Uranus is it's new ideas, it's new forms, it's things we have already outgrown, actually. Now, Uranus is still in Taurus, ruled by Venus, linked to banking, wealth, currencies, etc. So actually, Uranus and Venus are in what's called mutual reception, because Uranus is ruling the sign that Venus is in, and Venus is ruling the sign that Mars is in. So we could see some important new developments in digital currencies. They could be cryptocurrencies, whatever. This could be either a centralized push or decentralized currencies. Both are valid here. And also some kind of potential turbulence on the currency markets could happen at this time as well. Uranus is a very, very volatile energy. So despite the fact these are trines, we've also got Venus conjunct Pluto, which can suggest a fundamental change in wealth or currencies. And remember, Uranus is ruling Aquarius anyway. And so just be very aware of that. I mean, I think it was, I just happened to notice, and, who knows if it'll have any relevance, but I happened to catch the chart for the Wall Street crash. The Wall Street crash happened on the 29th of October, 1929 at 5:32 p.m., so 17:32 local time, New York. It has its midheaven in that chart at 29 degrees of Capricorn. So, within minutes of this new moon, it's just a very interesting resonance. So I find that fascinating. The other thing to mention, actually, is that the Federal Reserve chart, which is so important, obviously, for the dollar, is at the midheaven of that chart, the Federal Reserve chart, which was set for 23rd of December 1913, 1802, Washington, D.C., is at 0 of Aries, exactly where the Saturn Neptune conjunction is going to be moving on to on the 20th of February. So, Neptune always suggests a dissolution, and Saturn is some kind of new form or new structure. So we just have some very interesting resonances in that. Actually, in that Federal Reserve chart, the Sun is also at 1 degree of Capricorn, so that Saturn-Neptune conjunction, once it moves on to 0 of Aries, is going to be square to the Sun, the leadership in that Federal Reserve organization. We just have some, I find these fascinating. So we have quite a lot of suggestions about how the manifestations of how this may unfold. Of course, also not to escape either is this new moon is conjunct Pluto in the US chart, set for the 4th of July, 1776, 10 past 5 in the afternoon, Philadelphia. Pluto in that chart is in the second house of the country's income, worth, the dollar, the value of the dollar. So just, we have quite a few sort of little cascade of resonances suggesting something economic, something financial at this time. That's going to become stronger in February at that solar eclipse for sure. And with the Saturn Neptune conjunction 3 days after that. But we have the beginnings of this. So interesting, I think very interesting to observe. Also, we are birthing new values here, because Taurus is also not just about money in terms of that kind of worth, but also about values. What new values are developing? If the old forms of money, the fiat currencies are diminishing for whatever reason, what new long-term values can we start to birth? Whether it's investment into different, more reliable forms of wealth, or whether it's just a whole shift of values of money mattering less, not because anybody's telling us that, because we just shift to thinking that human connection and sharing and collaboration is more important. That's what I mean. I don't mean any dodgy agenda that I'm suggesting here. Also, the fact that this stellium is trying to Sedna really, and Sedna is also about a complete change in state, a complete metamorphosis. And the Uranus conjunction to Sedna is about the ignition of that metamorphosis, which becomes exact at the end of May. This is really starting to birth a whole new state of being as well. Very positive trines here, easing the way in whatever new seed we are planting here with our birthing of the new structures and our long-term realistic planning. What are we going to birth? What are we going to birth for ourselves? What are we going to birth for the world as well? Mars is exalted in a very good position here in Capricorn. This is the master, the leader in some way. So Mars operates superbly well in terms of organization in Capricorn. So also this huge stellium is actually in a sextile, or much of it, certainly Mars, Mercury, the new moon, and just about Venus I'd include, is in a sextile to Saturn and Neptune. So they're helping to birth this big new birth that begins on the 20th of February. So much here. They are also square to Haumea, all of them tightly. Haumea, remember, is our dwarf planet, very linked to regeneration and rebirth. By the way, I'm discovering some beautiful things about stem cell medicine, which I think Haumea, particularly in Scorpio, is all about. I talked, referred several times to the stem cell injection in my knee with my own blood stem cells. I wasn't taking it from anybody else or any animal or anything cruel or nasty. They were my own blood stem cells. And I've read recently that there's some new developments in helping people recover from blindness if they've had corneal damage or an accident, a blow or something like that to the eye, that they are now starting in, I believe, in clinical trials to use the patient's own stem cells to help regenerate the eye stem cells to cure people of blindness, which would be amazing. I think it's in incredibly early stages, by the way, but I've just picked this up, in fact, today. So we have, we just have an enormous amount happening here at this new moon Capricorn. This is just the beginning. I mean, the astrology for 2026 is absolutely jam-packed. I'm going to be a very busy person. So I'm just going to stop sharing here and just mention a few more things in late January. On the 20th, we have that Venus-Pluto conjunction becoming exact at 3 degrees of Aquarius, again on the ascendant of China. And again, it's to do with some kind of deep change or volatility around money, currencies. In your own life, if this falls in your 5th house or your 7th house, there may be some issues around control in your relationship, or jealousy or over possessiveness, or that kind of thing. And you have to choose whether that is okay or whether you need much more freedom going forwards, in which case that relationship may change. On the 22nd, Mercury becomes exactly conjunct to Pluto at 3 degrees of Aquarius. And that's really about powerful truths coming to light, because Pluto is the planet linked to secrets. Aquarius is linked to truth. And when you get any hard aspect between Mercury and Pluto, secrets, big secrets, hidden secrets, deeply hidden secrets can come to light. So that's going to be an interesting day. And then just one day later, on the 23rd, we have the Sun conjunct Pluto, which happens once a year. This is issues around power, freedom, human rights, civil rights. Remember, that's all Aquarian energy. Greater equality demanded. It's a very revolutionary energy. On that day, we have the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, all conjunct Pluto. 5 planets in Pluto. We also have the Moon in Aries. Pretty feisty energy, I would say, around issues of freedom, power, etc. Very interesting day. On the 26th, don't forget, we have Neptune for the first time well, it did dip into Aries, remember, in the middle months of last year, but now fully moving into 0 of Aries on the 26th of January. That's going to be a very important day. The next day, on the 27th, we have Mars exactly conjunct Pluto on the 27th. This can be power again, brute force, can give tremendous focus and willpower individually to what you're doing. But we also that day have the Moon conjunct Uranus, which is the revolutionary energy of the people. And so that is a forceful day, a really forceful day. And remember, this is happening in the year of the fire horse, when we had that Uranus-Pluto conjunction back in 1966. This is a very big shift of energy from earth and water signs for the outer planets into air and fire. So we only have Saturn remaining, which on the 14th of February moves into Aries, and then finally Uranus moves out of Taurus into Gemini on the 26th of April. Then all of the outer planets are fully in their new signs of air and fire. Fast, vigorous, clear. Truth, freedom. Big issues. So remember, if you have any planet between about 0 and 5 degrees of the fixed signs, well, actually any sign is going to be aspected. But if you have any planets between, I'm thinking Pluto here principally, in a fixed sign of Aquarius, if you have any planets between 2 and 5 degrees of a fixed sign, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, you are really going to be feeling that this is a transformative year for you, and it will be. You will have even bigger endings and beginnings than the average. It really is a snake shedding a skin, depending on where these aspects are falling in your chart. It's intense, you're diving deep to birth a whole new beginning for yourself. So with this issue around structures and Capricorn, which, as I say, traditionally, it's very much about traditional structures that we've lived through, governments, corporations, institutions, when they become too top heavy, and again, as you know, I've gone back to the historical cycles of Pluto moving out of Capricorn into Aquarius in the 1200s, the 1500s, the 1700s. I'll put those videos below so you can go back and check what I was saying. Gosh, I think it was almost 2 years ago about this. But whenever the inequality becomes too great and Pluto's tipped into Aquarius, the structures are really no longer operating in harmony with natural law. We get an extreme imbalance, and they start to fragment and disintegrate because the inequality is too great. It's no longer a natural balance. The tipping point is reached, and it's kind of like a phase shift. And once that energy starts to shift, accelerated by all this very high frequency light from the sun and the galactic core, the galactic center, that shift becomes unstoppable. And this is incredibly positive for humanity and for Gaia. This is now unstoppable, this energetic shift. So for a time, it will appear that we have two overlapping realities, the old 3D and the high level 5D and beyond. And we will be living in those to different degrees. Depending on how much you focus on the old world, you might be much more focused on the news and what's happening that feels scary, or you may be much more in 5D and beyond, focused on love and joy and what you want to create in a more abundant, compassionate world. Up to you, entirely our own free choice. But if you are still much more focused on the 3D world, the journey may appear to be less comfortable, because as that disintegrates and becomes more chaotic, you may feel that you're almost just hanging onto pieces of driftwood eventually that are just no longer working in the way that they used to, because they're not meant to, because we've outgrown them, because we're moving to something much more loving, compassionate, abundant, and equal. Never completely equal, but more equitable than we've known in our lifetimes. And so the old is just dying very loudly right now, very loudly. If you want to move into these higher dimensions, of course, many people are talking about the many, many ways of doing this, but just try and energetically disengage, remove your attention and focus. Maybe stop watching the news. Maybe start to meditate more, maybe in nature more, maybe join a group of like-minded people who are trying to create this more loving world. And that really will, the more we can stay in heart coherence is such a big part of this, because when we're in heart coherence, we broadcast that out literally many, many feet beyond us. We infect people with our coherence. But we create this new energetic template of loving coherence, and that affects the whole collective, and it affects Gaia. So you will be of great service to humanity and Gaia the more you can do that, even for 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day. You are in great service to humanity and Gaia. And always, as you know, when we do the 15-minute free meditations, I always suggest that you say, this is for my highest good, the highest good of all, and the highest good of the earth. That feeling of altruism will benefit the collective, but also bounce back to you too. It just enlarges everything. And remember, what I've been talking about in these last couple of minutes is just energy in physics. It's just magnetic resonance. That's all it is, but everything is birthed from that. Everything is birthed from energy and the physics of consciousness. So just keep saying, unless you can think of anything better, we're welcoming in an ever-expanding consciousness of love. And remember that the light is the game changer and love is the checkmate. God bless. We are going to be on quite a ride in 2026, which is enormously exciting. God bless. Bye for now. I'm going to be back very soon. I've got a very busy week coming up, so you'll be seeing more videos coming out this week. God bless. Bye for now.